And on the topic of customers, Carol, how can businesses maintain customer relationships and mitigate disruptions, as well as maintain staff morale on the other end? You mentioned earlier that it's the people, your customers, your staff that are key to coursing through this journey. But what are some of the strategies that businesses or business leaders can design or put in place to maintain those relationships with customers on one hand and also maintain staff morale?
Shungu, I don't know if you know Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, and he's on record as saying that as a company, Microsoft has transformed faster in the months between January and March 2020 than they have transformed in the last 2 years, largely because of just the amount of changes and the demands that customers now are making on technology. So if a company of that size and that scale can say, whoa, this has been moved faster in 3 months than we've done in 2 years, we can also be asking ourselves the same thing, because how are our customers using our products now? And are they using them in a different way? So the example that Jeremy is giving of industry is a very example. I'm sorry, there's feedback.
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Jeremy, can you hear Carol?
Yeah, it's not 100% clear, but please go ahead.
I'll try and speak slowly.
That's
so,
clear,
so your customers are using your products much more differently than maybe you had even planned for it. And it's a question of now sitting and understanding, how are your customers using your products? So it's not waiting to be hit, but actually going in, talking to the customers, looking at how, they talk about, there's an example, I'll give this very quick example of a study that was done by McDonald's. And they came to discover that during winter, the sale of milkshakes in one particular jurisdiction was always going very, very high. And they had to go and they sent in some Harvard researchers to find out, why are milkshake sales going through the roof during winter in a certain location? And these Harvard professors sat there and observed, and most of the milkshake sales were happening in the drive-through. Not even people walking in, but actually through the drive-through. And so now they started, talking to customers, what's going on? So it turns out that most of these customers lived about an hour's commute. So I would say, if you to look at the Kenyan example, maybe they lived in Machakos and were working in Nairobi. And it was such a boring commute, because it was just one straight long highway, that they would buy the milkshakes, because the milkshake is very hard. If you get a good milkshake, when you're sucking it through the straw, it takes a very long time to come through. And that process of sucking this milkshake through the straw was what would kill the boredom, from Machakos to Nairobi. And so they came up with this whole paper around customers use your product to do a certain job, not necessarily what you create that product to do. So sitting down and figuring out, what are your customers using your product for? And now that's going really in deep and understanding. And I keep going back to walking in your customer's shoes. And there's no one better to do that than your frontline staff.
Thank you, Carol. Well, you've spoken as experts, you're leaders, but leaders are human too. And as leaders yourself, what have been your experiences thus far in terms of some of the tools, strategies you have found useful as you navigate through this period towards the future? So as leaders yourselves, yes, the strategies in terms of business, in terms of customers, but as humans and individuals, how are you navigating through this uncertain time? Jeremy?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is, especially maybe because of this pandemic, for me, the foremost priority once we got into this was the safety and care of our colleagues, because we are in an essential business, we're serving customers, and our colleagues were very concerned. They didn't know they didn't know who is walking in and who potentially is carrying the virus, whether it would affect them, infect them, they take it home. There's fear around whether this is going to end up causing them severe sickness, even death. So the first thing was really around, how do we protect, show care, and create a working environment that gives our colleagues that confidence that they can come in. So that was where the focus was. It wasn't around what are we doing with products initially. It was just that sanitizers, where they operate, social distancing, which branches are open, the hours they're open, etc. So I think that part was important. I think the other thing was also to give as much certainty as you can in an uncertain world, because people are reaching out. First question is my salary going to be cut? Yeah. Am I going to lose my job? Because they're seeing it happening all around. So in our context, we said, look, that would be the last resort for us to say we're going to start cutting headcount as a result of this pandemic, or we're cutting salaries. And we're fortunate enough, we're well capitalized, we've got good liquidity, and we have the capacity to work through this. I think the third thing is really around just continuing to communicate very clearly, and probably communicating more with our customers than we ever have in the past. Because I think in the past we had products, we'd kind of leave it a lot remotely, but people are looking to leaders to say, what's your direction here? What are you doing? How are you helping? And I think people are looking more to their leaders to help more than anything else. And I can tell you, in the banking industry, it's quite challenging as a leader, because most people want money. They want more loans, and yet the environment is very uncertain. So people say, I need to borrow more. And whether we like it or not all businesses are going to make it through. It's just the sad reality that quite a number of businesses are going to fold and never reopen. Quite a number of businesses are going to open in ways and not maybe to the levels they were pre the pandemic. But then again, some are going to open in a stronger way. So I think that, like for me personally, there's an expectation that the banking sector is going to underwrite all businesses. But we forget that banks are also businesses, and also have shareholders, and also have a duty of care to protect not just their depositors who entrust us with their money, but the shareholders who also expect a return. Because if we don't deliver a return for them, and we have an unhealthy, unsafe financial industry, then the economy is really going to struggle. So that's also been a challenge. And I think at a personal level, we have to cut ourselves some slack. We don't have all the answers. We just have to do the best we can with the information we can. And it's very easy to criticize and say, well, that didn't work. But the point is, we did the best. We took the decision we did with the information we have. And it's easy to forget information evolves that might make your decisions look wrong or right at that point in time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Carol, as a leader, yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Shungu. Go ahead.
No, over to you.
Yeah, so Shungu, what I was going to say is two things. One is, as a business leader, is checking in with your staff. One thing that working from home in this remote working environment has taught us, every single one of us has had frontline view of our staff and where they live, the circumstances under which they live in, who they live with, how they live. I've had one team meeting where one person says, my water's just packed up and the plumber is here, so I'm going to put my Zoom on mute. I won't be able to participate. I'll participate by chatting. So we spend the first 5 minutes of every single meeting, first 5 minutes, how are you? Just answer that question. How are you doing? How was it today? It's really, you've seen lots of people have a lot of fear, what's going to happen tomorrow? Carol, what do you think? When are we going to go back to the office? I genuinely don't know when we're going to go back to the office. The president doesn't know when we're going to go back to the office. So we just sort of have to work with what we have here and reaching out to them and just saying, look, if you need counseling, we need to arrange for counseling for this to be had. Most of them live in family environments, some live alone, and those are the ones that I'm most concerned for, because when you're in a family environment, you've got people that you can talk to. But if you're living alone, that becomes harder. So the human side of me as a leader has had to come out and just don't go straight into business, just find out how are people. How's your grandmother? We saw she was sick last week. Is she doing fine? Just the human side to that. The second thing I want to talk about is what from going forward, if and when we come out of this, because we will come out of this, is as a business leader, you will have to strongly think about building a war chest, because this is not going to be the first pandemic that we're going to go through. There are going to be other crises that will come in. And so starting to rethink, do you pay out all your dividends every year, as some people want to do? Or do you start building a war chest to help you? I'm going to keep using that buzzword, help you have a runway in the event you go through a downturn again. So building a war chest. Jeremy's I can speak because I'm not in the banking industry, so I'll speak on what Jeremy is really trying to say is, banks will only finance working capital for a going concern. And they're at the point where they're having to think, is your business a viable going concern? And if it's not a viable going concern, then they can't fund your working capital because you may not be in existence. You may think it, but they've done their analysis, they've done a whole industry analysis, and they may see that it may not survive this, particularly if you're in the hospitality, in the tour and travel industry. Difficult times and difficult decisions for them to make at this time. So building a war chest that can help you think about, that can carry you through a certain time like this is going to be absolutely critical, even when we come out of it, because my hand on heart, I do not believe this is the last that we're seeing of this. Jeremy talked about L and U and V. I think it's just going to be a whole series of zigzags because we're going to keep having flare-ups and going down, flare-ups and going down. This is with us to stay. And this is now a time for us as business owners to put skin in the game, because that's what your banks are going to ask you. What skin in the game are you putting in here? You can't come to us for help. What are you going to do? Do you need to sell a shamba? Do you need to sell a car? Do you need to downsize on your house? But they will also need to see you putting in some skin in the game. That's it from me, Shungu.
Thank you, Carol. So having to make very tough decisions, but being human too in terms of recognizing, the wellness and the needs of customers and staff. So we've come to the end of our formal questions. Thank you very much, Jeremy and Carol, for that engagement. We will now move into checking what questions, insights, reflections are from the floor, from our participants as well. Jeremy, I was aware you might need to leave us at some point, so just do flag when that moment comes through. But I'll quickly now, in a second, revert to where our questions tabs are and see what has come through from our participants from the floor. And Andia, your help, if you can also check and see what questions are coming from the floor. And while we wait to see what comes through in terms of our questions from the floor, Carol, you mentioned earlier in terms of the institution you're supporting, you're on the board of, and how the parastatal and already some of the systems have been shifted, have been adapted to be able to continue providing, I think it was registration services that you mentioned. And typically, I think perhaps not only in Kenya, but in many of our African countries, it is usually, regulatory institutions that take a while in terms of adapting and shifting to continue providing some of that support. If you could share what you view as some of the key success factors that have allowed that quick turnaround for the institution to adapt and continue providing support in these uncertain and challenging times.
So Shungu, we were lucky because the business registration services is part of the whole government push towards increasing Kenya's ranking in the ease of doing business. So we were a number of government entities have been pushed to providing an online digital platform for their services. So we were very lucky that we were up the curve on that already. So now the next step was, okay, now people can go online to apply for their services. If you're applying to form a company or a sole proprietorship or a partnership, you can do all of these services online. And there'd already been mergers with, merger of applications with the Kenya Revenue Authority. So for example, if you're applying for a business, you can do the same, get your Kenya Revenue Authority PIN. You can do the same with getting your National Social Security Fund number and your NHIF number. So we were very lucky that a lot of this work had already been going on. So a one-step application, you get your application in a day. So now the next step for us was then now, okay, ensure that all your staff have got, laptops and have got internet access so that they can be able to continue doing the approval of these applications off-site when they're not in the offices. So we've been So we say it was a perfect storm. We were just in the right place at the right time, that all of these were already in place because the government is really trying to become digitized service provision.
Thank you. And the question for you, as people are still applying and registering businesses, Jeremy, we have a question that reads, how do I decide what business line to continue and stop in such an uncertain time? So how do I decide what business line to continue and stop in such an uncertain time?
I think it comes back down to a number of things. I think it comes down to your financial situation of your business, and your war chest and your amount of capital. Because if you have no capital and you have your bank account running on zero, then that question might be answered for you. Yeah. So you might not have a lot of flexibility. But I think if you are reasonably well capitalized, can get some access to finance, then you may be able to see it through. So I can tell you, we have many product streams as we speak at the moment that are underwater. They're just not making any money. They're notionally destroying value. But we view that this pandemic won't last forever, and that we're going to have to re-engineer our business. So rather than exit those products, those segments, to come back into them later, we'll stick it through. We'll try and get the efficiencies. We'll pivot our business, and then gradually over time they will come back. So I think it really depends on your circumstances. But I think, in all honesty, you also have to look and see whether your products and services are still relevant. Because the world has changed, and if your product isn't relevant anymore, then hanging on in the way that you used to do it, you're just going to flush money down the toilet. Yeah. So I think every business is different, and that's why we're seeing different industries taking different stances. Like the hotel industry, not any fault of their own, tourism, that people are not traveling, people are homebound. People are worried about their financial situation. So what have they done? They've tried to reduce their costs as much as possible by furloughing people, by closing up, by minimizing their utility costs. But now they're starting to think, maybe how do I use these premises I have for something in the short run, yeah, which will enable me to survive. And then once things open up, I can go back to my core business. So I don't think there's just one simple answer. I think you're going to have to be quite clear about your revenues, your costs, and how long you can continue to survive. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of businesses, what we hear is it could be anywhere from 1 week to about 3 months. I haven't seen that many businesses saying, I can survive 2 years in this pandemic. I mean, it's tough times. So the urgency will be predicated on the cash flows that you have in this environment.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. One last question before we release you, and I know Elizabeth is also with us on the line, and we'll continue in terms of the Q&A after. The pandemic has presented 1,000 other opportunities for startups. Will ABSA be willing to fund such startups?
I'm not sure, is that one for me or is that for Elizabeth? I can answer it if you like.
Before you go, Jeremy.
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that we've said, and may not be the most popular answer, is that banks are not typically the funders of startups. Yeah, and it's just predicated on the reality that greater than 90% of startups, sadly, are not going to make it to 3 years, 3 years time. But what I think banks can and are trying to do is to partner with other financiers who may have longer term risk appetite, ability to share some of the risk so that we can bring capital, they bring risk sharing mechanisms. So for example, one of the things we're looking at is credit guarantee schemes, where either the government, multilateral or bilateral partners are able to take on some of that risk. So in the event of default, they also carry some of the risks, because if banks carry it alone, they will very quickly wipe out their capital and depositors' money. because if you don't have enough capital, you won't be able to operate as a going concern. So I think what we need to do is to create ecosystems where startups can access people who have that risk appetite and tolerance to be able to fund their business ideas. But having said which, we're finding people funding their startups by either starting them when they're employed, so they can use their salary as a means of getting loans to fund their business. And as their business grows, they can then decide when to stop being employed and to move full-time into their business. So right now in such a situation, I think probably the duty of care, in all honesty, is going to be providing businesses the lifelines and the support to keep open, to keep people employed, to keep those employed people being able to fund and feed their families. So I think we are working on those credit guarantee schemes, and we need to still do more. But I think more of our resources will probably go to tried and tested businesses who are just being impacted due to the circumstances we find ourselves in.